I recall our conversation just at the end of the battle. Voldemort was powerless, but some of his followers were powerful still. We will do what we must. And if the news I have come across just now is true, Dumbledore put down a Slytherin robe. Come in, Harry. Snape turned jerkily towards the door, waiting at least a minute before the door was pushed open slowly by Harry Potter, who looked past him deliberately and directly at Dumbledore. He stood aside as the teenager strode past him and looked at the headmaster, before watching him turn and throw him a disdainful look. Snape knew what it was about, and he could barely contain his glee at the boy's unhappiness. A smile played about his lips momentarily before Harry looked back at Dumbledore in desperation. "Yes, Harry. How may I be of assistance to you?" Dumbledore rose to his feet and instantaneously appeared at the other side of it. "Are you settling back into school?" Harry nodded, looking back at Snape with sheer hatred in his eye. "Mrs. Frobisher is not to be our moral studies teacher, Professor. And Professor Snape tells me that I must work with the new one. She's from the Ministry." "Yes indeed, Harry. She is from the Department of Mysteries. And I must work with her? Why is she here?" Before Dumbledore could answer, Snape smirked briefly again before interceding. "There is nothing more dearly we require than for Mrs. Frobisher to be amongst us all again. However, this is not to be. She is in hiding, as I explained to you not half an hour ago, because of correspondence irresponsibly sent. The Ministry have a trace on her, and any owls sent are tracked. It is her misfortune and ours that they have found her." Harry looked at Snape earnestly. "Where is she?" "I don't think that is any of your concern, Potter." "It is, if the potion is to do with me, if it's for me. So you believe the secret location of Mrs. Frobisher should be made known to you, despite the precariousness of her, and your, situation. You think I am irresponsible enough to just tell you? My safety has always been our utmost concern. Do our actions of last term tell you nothing? I am refining the potion based on her science in order for you to face the Dark Lord again. If you wish to waste your time with the trivialities of the subject on top of your OWL examinations, then be my guest. She taught me science," continued Harry unabashed. "It was interesting. How happy I am for you. I understood it. I've been continuing it. She's been teaching me." "Mrs. Frobisher has been teaching you science?" Even Dumbledore was looking at him in astonishment. "Hermione," Harry conceded. "She's the one who's continued to learn it from." Harry stopped, but too late. He realized he had given away his friend. "Mrs. Frobisher? Aha. And to think, Headmaster, that we have been taking every precaution available." Harry said nothing. Nor did Snape. The potion's master remained stock-still and emotionless, save only to stare back at the young wizard with an expression of pure malevolence. "Then it would appear your friend has put her, and indeed yourself, in danger, for, as of the start of this new term I am no longer in contact with Mrs. Frobisher for the reason I have just outlined to you. Should the potion not go entirely as expected, then be sure to spare a thought for your thoughtless friend. Now," Snape turned and looked in the direction of Dumbledore's office door, "you should contact with Professor Penright. The Ministry require you to give account of your work with Mrs. Frobisher in terms of the science, so perhaps your love of the Malart will come in handy after all." With a snort, Snape finished his tirade, and he watched as Harry turned for a last-ditch reprieve from Dumbledore. As the teenager made to go, Snape turned to watch him. "Potter." Harry turned and stared back at Snape. "What?" "Do yourself a favor. Try to mislead Professor Penright as much as possible. Goodbye. 88,888,888. Fight. Fight. Fight." The chant echoed into the evening air around the local park as the day boarders at Smeltings and the local comprehensive Stonewall High squared up to one another. It was the former school's first day back. and the latter's 6th, and thus their first opportunity in 3 weeks to have a right good Barney. Dudley Dursley, bereft of the constricting and humiliating uniform that he was compelled to wear at Smeltings, donned combat trousers and a heavy metal t-shirt stretched awkwardly across his large torso, began squaring up to a short stocky boy who looked like a human bulldog in a tracksuit, Adidas trainers and a hoodie which he had down in order to gain full view of his shaven head. Around them upper-class boys from Smeltings and on the stone wall side working-class girls stood together in ragged groups looking on in a not-looking-on way, as if trying not to observe and observe as closely as possible at the same time. The inner circle around the lads roared with the names of the contenders, the latest in a 40-odd-year opposition that had began when Smeltings was rebuilt. The 2 of them now, sweating and trying to look hard, being the latest in a long line of representatives. Fight! 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 The chant reverberated again around the local park as both boys held up their arms, fists raised, one a school's boxing champion and the other a school's prime reprobate. Who would make the first swing? As the onlookers looked on, and the inner circle closed in further pushing them in closer proximity than before, their minds were silently made up as the opponents eyed each other with pure hatred. "I'm going to get him," snarled the lad from Stonewall, wrinkling his nose and exposing a line of nicotine-stained teeth. "Our Mark hasn't been able to walk straight since you sorted him out, Dursley," he growled, making a mock swing in Dudley Dursley's direction and laughing contemptuously as the larger boy swerved out of the preempted trajectory of his fist. "I don't like your sort, Iron Boy. You don't play by the R-dash." But the lad didn't have a chance to finish as he was hurled to the floor, his rotund frame engulfed by Dudley's huge stature. In his fall to the ground though, the Stonewall hard nut had managed to floor Dudley. Around them the inner circle, eyes fixed on each other's opponent in undisguised delight at the sport before them, cheered madly, one half screaming Fraser and the other for Duds. A group of onlookers, girl clones for want of a better description, screamed in disgust as the fighting boys rolled past the group and out, the fight taking place feet from them, and they moved back in disgust, but not too far back that they couldn't see exactly what was going on, so they could recount it in all its glory to other girl clones later that evening. And then one of the girls, brushing her bleached blonde hair behind her ears, noticed another figure homing into view and, ignoring the now increasing landing of punches, kicks and thumps that was the fight before them, she nudged another clone, who zipped up her tracksuit jacket and elbowed a third. Beside them, a Stonewall lad looked in the direction that they were looking, and a few moments later more were looking at the emerging stranger than at the fight that was still going. Then one of the boys spoke. "Oh look, it's another Iron Boy." The Stonewall school faction roared in laughter, pointing at the uniform as the teenager approached. In return Darren Malloy shot them a well-practiced look of pure venom which silenced them immediately, and uncertain whispers began to circulate as Duds broke off from the fighting and looked at Malloy, and Aza ceased too, appraised him with contempt. By now, even the Smeltings side began to whisper, "What was he doing here?" Malloy, who spoke to no one, who sat alone and apart. The unanswered questions turned into answers in a second as Malloy raised his hand into a flat palm. Dudley Dursley hauled himself up onto his feet, staring doubtfully at the newcomer. Then, in a fraction of a second, Malloy had turned to Aza. The whole crowd in the park was silent and still. Ask any of them later, and each of them would be able to tell you that Malloy then spoke to Aza. Ask any of them and they would have told you that his voice was cold and calm, as if he was addressing a child. Ask any one of the spectators what Darren Malloy actually said to Aza and they would all have been at a loss. And within moments, Aza, the hardest boy at Stonewall, was flat on his back, laid out cold within seconds as Malloy took a step back. Though so different a streak of similarity bonded two of Smelting's two most interesting characters, and the start of an unusual association began,